Today is Tuesday, April the 4th, 2017, and today we got to talk about Susan Rice and this whole big crazy mess down there in Washington, D.C., this whole big kerfuffle. This is like a big octopus, many tentacles. But before we go down that rabbit hole, what I want to do is tell you who Susan Rice is and what she's been accused of doing. Now, Susan Rice at one point was the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, and she was also the national security advisor. Both of these jobs are under Barack Obama. She has been described as a sister to Barack Obama, so they're very close, which is very important. And I'll get to that a little bit later. She is also married to a man named Ian Cameron. Ian Cameron is an executive over at ABC News, which is also very important. And again, I'll get to that a little bit later. Now, what she's been accused of doing is unmasking people in the Trump administration, Trump's family, and Trump himself in so-called incidental intelligence gathering that was conducted on somebody else. So basically, in layman's terms, somebody or some people were being investigated by the federal government. Information, intelligence was gathered, and then reports were created. Now, in the reports, an actual paper or the digital documents, whatever, what has to happen is when somebody is captured in that intelligence gathering that was not the focal point, you have to redact their names. So you can't reveal their identity. That cannot be revealed to the press. That cannot be revealed to anybody. Now, some people have the ability to be able to reverse the redaction. Out of the three, which I put on the screen before you, and shout out to Mike Cernovich. He's a great person for this report. He was the first person that actually broke this whole thing, which was kind of crazy because just a few days ago, he was featured on 60 Minutes as the so-called face of fake news. But I digress. You can see on the screen before you who had the actual ability to be able to reverse the redaction, and Susan Rice was one of them. She is the one that invoked her ability to be able to reverse the redaction. Now, the ability to reverse redaction came about in 2011 during the Obama administration, and there are certain criteria that you're able to reverse redaction under, and I placed that on the screen before you. And that's very important because one of them is like dealing with foreign nationals and so-called terrorism. But I'll talk about that towards the end. Now, what happened was somebody told on her. Somebody said that, hey, Susan Rice is over here requesting constant, reversal of the redaction to see who's in it, to unmask the people. And that information got down to Nunes. Now, Nunes is the one that reported it. Remember that a while ago. He was one that was saying, hey, something's fishy here. Trump said that there was wiretapping going on, but that's not quite what happened. But this is what's going on.
I also said that while there was not a physical wiretap of Trump Tower, I was concerned that other surveillance activities were used against President Trump and his associates. So first, I recently confirmed that on numerous occasions, the intelligence community incidentally collected information about U.S. citizens involved in the Trump transition. Details about U.S. persons associated with the incoming administration, details with little or no apparent foreign intelligence value, were widely disseminated in intelligence community reporting.
So he pretty much knew what it was from the beginning. He actually knew a long time ago. He actually knew like in January. You know that this kind of thing is kind of like abusing power. That's my opinion on it anyway. This is abusing power. What Susan Rice did was not necessarily illegal, but the question is, why did she do it? Matter of fact, what surprised me was that I saw on MSNBC, a person was asking the question, hey, why did she do this?
What are we mad at Susan Rice for doing? She was the national security advisor. According to James Jeffrey, she had the ability to ask for those names. No law was broken. What are we mad about?
I'm not mad at anything yet, Ali. Eli Lake makes clear in his Bloomberg piece that what she did is in fact legal. It's unusual, though, and the pattern and practice has got to be revealed. I think she needs to be called before the Senate and House Intelligence Committees to ask why she requested unmasking, how often she did so, and with whom did she share, if anyone. We don't know if she shared it with anyone. Why did she do so? There's a series of questions here that go to whether or not, while this does not appear to involve General Flynn yet, it did in fact involve General Flynn, because the fear, not yet proven, is that National Security Advisor Rice swept up a bunch of what ought to have been minimized names and identities and left them lying around in places where they would make their way to the press.
if you had an intelligence report, raw intelligence, and you wanted the names of people therein unmasked for your own purposes or reasons that you needed in the government, who would you have to explain that to?
You'd have to explain that to the agency that owns the intelligence. But to just add, these things are listed as U.S. person number 1, U.S. person number 2. The game we would play when we saw raw intelligence, and it usually took us 5 seconds, was to figure out who it was. So I think this is very curious that she would ask for these names to be unmasked because, as I said, we normally could figure out who it is.
And it's a valid question because, like the man said, why do you need to do it? You could pretty much tell who it is. Like, have you ever seen some of these TV shows or movies where they, where they read a redacted report?
Civilian and military units shall be trained in containment and combat of classified, including irradiated classified with possibility of classified airborne, classified flesh eating, classified.
They'll tell you everything in the sentence. It's like if you have one name missing from a sentence, is it impossible to tell who it is? A lot of times you could tell. You could say redacted was golfing at Mar-a-Lago again for the 10th time in a row. You know who that is. Okay. There's no need to unmask unless you're trying to leak to the press. Now, I don't know if Susan Rice is the one that unredacted or unmasked the names in the report and then that got leaked to the press. But to me, it seems like all evidence points right there because Michael Flynn, his name did get unmasked and then leaked to the press, which is actually a felony. You can't do that. So who did it? Right. And to me, that would be the reason why you unmask. If you're able to tell who the person is without unmasking, what is the point in unmasking? Maybe you wanted to get to the press and get the information out there. Therefore, you kind of just break down the Trump administration. I think that's what it is. And then about this whole unmasking thing, terrorism and any kind of foreign nationals. So maybe that's the whole point behind this Russia story. Maybe that's the whole reason why the mainstream media, ABC News, Susan Rice's husband, maybe that's why they want to keep pushing this Russia narrative, because that's a way for them to have an excuse to say, oh, well, we had to investigate the person because they were dealing with Russia. But they may have just tried to say that they were dealing with Russia as a way to also capture Trump's intelligence to get stuff on Trump, his family, and his associates, and then try to reveal it when he got into office, if he did, back during the campaign, so they could sabotage him, or maybe just leak it during the campaign to make him less effective in the actual in the voting. That's what I'm thinking, because what other reason would you request unmasking in that particular circumstance? What is the purpose? If you know who it is, then why unmask? Right? So I think that's what's going on here. So shame on Susan Rice. Shout out to Cernovich. Shout out to the alternative media. It's hilarious how 60 Minutes tried to call him fake news, and he's the one that actually put out some real news. He was one that broke it. And Maggie Haberman, I think from New York Times, one of these old media places, she had the story for 48 hours and wanted to so-called protect the Obama administration, allegedly, which just goes to show that there's favoritism and nepotism when you're talking about media. And there's also an unholy collusion between the mainstream media and the government. Look at Susan Rice married to Ian Cameron. There's a lot of stuff like that going on. People are married to people. People are brother and sister. People are like lifelong friends. Look at what happened with Hawaii in the blocking of Trump's travel ban. And the guy was a former classmate of Barack Obama, and he's from Hawaii. So you want to tell me that it just happened? He just happened to be the guy that stopped the travel ban in the 0 hour. You think that Obama didn't know him? And Obama went to Hawaii 48 hours before the travel ban had been blocked. So you tell me what's going on. So that's pretty much all I got. Again, I have more information in the box below. This is a very deep story. I'll sum it up for you. Susan Rice requested that certain documents that were captured on Trump's family, Trump himself, and Trump's administration during the campaign be unmasked. So she's able to maybe leak it to the press, see it for herself. I'm not quite sure why. They said that there was no investigation done on Donald Trump, but at the same time, there was through Proxy. America loves Proxy, all these proxy wars, but then you want to have proxy investigations. You want to investigate one person to try and get dirt on somebody else. And then you say you're going to redact information, but then you pass a rule that says you can unredact it and unmask it, and then it somehow gets leaked to the press. Now you got Michael Flynn get caught up in a big world of trouble. He was the only one that got leaked, Michael Flynn, by the way, in my opinion, because he had so-called ties to Russia, but nobody else did. If anybody else did, then they would have been leaked as well. And again, the reason for that could be they're trying to say that Russia is this rogue foreign power, and they got to unmask it for that particular purpose. But that's just my 2 cents on it. What do you think? Do you think that Susan Rice had intentionally done this just to leak the information to the press, to make Trump look bad, to try and get Trump trapped up, to set him up, to get impeached or whatever? Do you think that Susan Rice, a woman who has been described as Obama's sister, do you think that she was acting on the behest of Barack Obama? Do you think Barack Obama was like, okay, I need you to do X, Y, and Z? Is that what it was? Was Obama the puppet master behind the whole thing? I think that he may have been, but at the same time, I don't think he had to be, because if you got somebody that's loyal to Obama like that, to the point where they're described as family, even though they're only co-workers, if you got that going on, then why not be the attack dog? Why not do grimy, underhanded things? That's what the Democrat Party does anyway. In the interview she did with, what was that, PBS, I put that in the box below. You could tell when she was answering questions, she was kind of shifty and trying to remember her answers. You know, I could tell that she was not being honest then, but now we have information coming out from various sources that she was, in fact, if not being dishonest, most certainly being deceptive. Or do you think that tinfoil hat wearing guy, Trump is colluding with the Russians, lock him up? Now, if that's your assertion, then explain to me how Michael Flynn's name got leaked to the press. How did that happen? How did it happen? And do you think that Susan Rice should be able to request that information about Trump's campaign, his family members, and himself be unmasked? And why would she do that? Now, I'm not saying it's illegal, but there's a certain thing called unethical. And it's a certain thing when you abuse the laws to make them work in your favor. You want to accuse the right of doing stuff like that. But every time I see it happen in the news, it comes from the left. That's just my 2 cents on it. Whatever your comments are, let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.